We are finally having some cooler temps, which means all the fall flavors and recipes. Today I'm going to share with you a few favorites of mine, some healthy, refined sugar-free pumpkin muffins, a harvest kale salad, and my favorite chili recipe that we have on repeat throughout the fall and winter. First up, I'm making a batch of oat flour pumpkin muffins. I sweeten these with maple syrup to make them refined sugar-free, and I also like to use oat flour because as long as you're getting certified gluten-free oats, if it's an issue for you, they are naturally gluten-free. It's affordable to make at home, and I always have oats on hand, so it is my go-to when it comes to baking. To start out, I am melting some butter, and I'm just going to get that onto the stove so that I can start on the muffin batter. Almost all of my baking recipes are one bowl recipes because the less dishes, the better. So to a large bowl, I'm adding some plain canned pumpkin puree. I'm also adding some Greek yogurt, which will add a little bit of protein. Then to sweeten, I'm using pure maple syrup. You can also substitute in cane sugar if that is your preference, but I like the flavor that the maple adds. And again, it is refined sugar-free. You're going to get some minerals from it. Then I also add in a couple eggs along with some vanilla extract and the melted butter. Then that all gets whisked together. Once the wet ingredients are fully combined, I'm adding in some baking soda, baking powder, salt, and then I like to use both cinnamon and pumpkin spice. Since I'm doing this all in one bowl, I like to add that all into the wet ingredients to make sure that it's evenly distributed before I go ahead and add in the flour. As always, I'll have the recipes from today's video in the description box down below. Once that is fully combined, I'm adding in my oat flour. Now, I make my oat flour at home. I just use certified gluten-free oats. Obviously, if gluten is not a concern for you, you can just use regular oats. And I blend them in a blender until it resembles a flour. Super easy, and it's a lot more affordable to grind your own oat flour at home than to buy it at the store. I also prefer the texture most of the time over gluten-free flour blends. So this is what I've been doing for years, and I am just mixing that into the batter. Now, because this is gluten-free, you don't really have to worry about overmixing the way you do with flours that contain gluten. At this point, you could stir in chocolate chips if you like. I'm not a huge pumpkin and chocolate person, so I like to leave these just as is, and this is when I will preheat the oven. Anytime I'm baking with oat flour, I like to let the batter sit for just a few minutes before using it. It just helps the flour to absorb some of the moisture, and it gives it a better texture in the end. I'm filling my muffin tins about 3/4 of the way full. I like to top these off with some pumpkin seeds, but you could also use walnuts or another type of nut if you prefer, or again, chocolate chips, and those are going to bake in a 350-degree oven for about 20 minutes. While the muffins were in the oven, I got started on some quinoa for my harvest kale salad. It helps to bulk up the salad to make it more of a meal, along with everything else that's going to be included in it. So I'm just measuring up my quinoa, giving it a good rinse, and I'm adding that to a pot along with some chicken bone broth. You can just cook this in water, but I like to use bone broth whenever I can. It just adds a little bit of nutrition. Then I'll just bring that up to a boil, reduce it down to a simmer, and cover the pot for about 15 minutes to cook. Then remove it from the heat and allow it to sit aside to fully cool until it's time to assemble the salad. At this point, the muffins were done. They turned out great. They are not super sweet, which is my preference, and definitely will be a staple for us this fall. I allow those to cool in the muffin trays, and then half of these I'll keep out and the other half will go into the freezer. This kale salad is delicious and it's really hearty, so I'm just getting all of my veggies cleaned up, and I'm going to need a sweet potato as well as an apple. I'm using a Honeycrisp apple because they are by far my favorite, and I'm also washing up some kale from the garden. I'm going to be roasting the sweet potato for the kale salad, so I'm just slicing that, and then the sweet potato is going to roast in a 400-degree oven for about 20 to 25 minutes or so, just until it's golden. I just add the sweet potato to a sheet pan, drizzle it with a little bit of olive oil, season with salt and pepper, toss that all together, and then into the oven. For the dressing for the kale salad, I'm using a mixture of some olive oil along with some apple cider vinegar. You could also do balsamic vinegar if you prefer. I also like to add in some honey, but you can also substitute the honey out for some apple butter. I just didn't have a jar open, but if I did, that's what I would do. It adds great flavor that works really well with this salad. I also like to add in some grainy mustard. Dijon also works, along with some chili flakes and a little bit of salt. Shake that up really well until it's combined, and then it is ready to dress the salad with. I'm also making some quick candied pumpkin seeds to add to the salad. For these, I'm adding some pumpkin seeds to a cast iron skillet, along with a little bit of cinnamon, a little bit of cayenne because I like a little bit of spice, and a drizzle of maple syrup. Let those toast up a little bit in the pan. You're gonna see that it gets nice and bubbly. Then I'll just remove them from the heat, allow them to fully cool in the pan, and they will harden up as they cool. If you want to skip this step, this salad is also just great with slivered almonds or chopped walnuts. Once the sweet potatoes were looking golden brown, they were done in the oven. I went ahead and removed the baking sheet, and I'm allowing these to fully cool before the salad gets put together. Now, moving on to prepping the kale, I like to chop it pretty thin. You can just tear it into large chunks if you prefer. I am going to remove the stems from the kale because they just tend to be a little bit tough and bitter. So all of that is just going to go into the compost. Once the quinoa, sweet potatoes, and candied pumpkin seeds are cool enough, the salad is ready to assemble. I'm just chopping up my Honeycrisp apple, adding that to the bowl. If you prefer, you can drizzle the salad dressing onto the kale and massage it in just to soften it up a little bit, but I went ahead and added that on later. Now I just added the roasted sweet potatoes, the quinoa, the candied pumpkin seeds, and I also did add some shredded chicken that I had cooked up in the Instant Pot the day before. You can leave that out if you want to make this vegetarian, or you could also just swap in chickpeas in place of the chicken. Drizzle the salad dressing over top. Now, I really like this salad with some goat cheese. My husband's not a fan of that, so I just left it off to add separately to my salads. And what I love about kale is that it makes for a salad that holds up really well in the fridge, and it kind of just gets better over time. I also made up a big batch of my very favorite chili. All of this cooking is going to serve as some meal prep for us. Now, the chili freezes really well, so every time I make a batch, I put some into the freezer so that I can easily pull it out for a quick meal. Now, to start out, I am dicing up a yellow onion along with an entire head of garlic. While I was chopping, I had a Dutch oven heating over medium-low heat with just a little bit of fat in there so that the veggies don't stick. I added in the onion and garlic to start to soften, and then I also added in a bunch of peppers. I have lots of peppers frozen from the garden, so that's what I'm using. These are mostly bell peppers. I also have some shishito peppers in this mix, and once those are fully softened, I'll go ahead and add in the meat. Once the peppers and onions had softened, I went ahead and made some space in the pot for the ground meat. Today I'm using ground beef, 2 pounds, but this also works really well with turkey. You can do whatever you prefer, and I'm gonna allow that to get cooking. After it has almost cooked through and it's starting to brown, I'll go ahead and add in the spices. To season the chili, I'm using a lot of chili powder. I also add in some cumin as well as some smoked paprika, which adds so much good flavor. Now, I also like to add just a little bit of brown sugar. I only do about a tablespoon for the whole recipe, and that adds just the slightest bit of sweetness to the chili, along with the smoked paprika, and I just really like that. I also did add a little bit of garlic powder because clearly we really like our garlic. I don't initially add salt to the chili just because the chili powder that I use has some salt in it, so I prefer to add salt as needed later once it's simmered a bit and the flavors have kind of all come together. Stir that up and allow those spices to really meld, and then I'll allow the meat to fully cook before everything else gets added. After a couple minutes, I add in an entire jar of tomato paste, stir that in, allow that to cook for a couple more minutes, and then I'm also adding in some of my home canned tomato sauce. This is just plain roasted tomato sauce, no seasoning. It is simply tomatoes roasted, blended up, and I really love to have this on my shelf. Then I also added a little bit of bone broth as well. So I just added that right into the jar to rinse off any of the leftover tomato sauce that was stuck in there. I also added in 2 jars of home canned kidney beans that I drained and rinsed, and I'm going to stir that all together really well, bring the chili up to a boil, and then I'll reduce it down to a simmer and cover it with a lid, and I'm just going to allow that to simmer for a couple hours over low heat, stirring occasionally. The longer the better. This is my very favorite chili, and it is something that is on repeat in our house throughout the colder months. I like my chili served up with some shredded sharp cheddar cheese, some green onion. I also like a little bit of sour cream on top typically, but I only had Greek yogurt today, and that did the trick. Now, if I have a jar of cowboy candy open, I will also add a little bit of that on top, and this just makes for the ultimate fall and winter comfort food. Thanks for joining me today in the kitchen. As always, the full recipe shared in the video will be in the description box down below, and I will see you in the next one.